we are in Menachem Begin Center. There is this event, and it's actually a follow-up. I met this person called Alon Penzel, who just finished a book on called Testimonies Without Boundaries in Hebrew, and he says it's being currently translated into English.
Yeah, finally, there is the English book if you want.
Yeah.
Now the event that we were in tonight was to talk about the English translation that has been completed.
Why is this book important?
This is important because I think there is a denial in this world about what happened on October 7th, and even if they admitted that it had happened, it didn't happen the way the Israelis would say. And so this is like first-hand testimonies of actual the volunteers, the Zaka volunteers. Zaka is an organization that was the first responder to go into when they collected the bodies, and they described what they saw, the condition, the state of those bodies, those corpses. So Alon went to interview those Zaka volunteers.
The book contains over 60 testimonies, most of them exclusive ones that haven't yet been exposed, that even the Israeli public itself has not yet been exposed to, that it is not yet aware of, obviously not the international community. The testimonies basically come from Zaka volunteers, from Israel's Medical Forensic Institute, where the bodies that have not been identified are examined. Nova survivors, those who survived the festival and basically lost their beloved ones, and many more testimonies of those who were part of the most difficult, complicated, horrific day in the history of the State of Israel. The purpose is to distribute it worldwide as much as possible and to get to the most important institutions such as the UN and the White House and parliaments all over the world. The process was very complicated, to say the least, not only for me, obviously, also for the ones who gave the testimonies. It was very close to the events. During the book, I also described the interaction I had during the interviews with the people giving me the testimonies, how I feel about asking these insensitive questions, and also the reactions of those people. I've seen beheaded people and I've seen dead bodies. I think that this event basically wakes us all up. It tells us exactly how cruel people can be. I would say that I'm also in cooperation with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Disapura, an Israeli organization called Israelis. The book is very significant mainly because it is uncensored. It tells the very true story of October 7th. The ministries that I described have already purchased thousands of copies in English in order to distribute the book in over 100 countries all over the world globally. I've sacrificed my mental soul, my mental health during the last 8 months for the State of Israel. Now I'm expecting everyone to take this book and distribute it as much as they can to make sure that people are exposed to the atrocities. This is our reality. And I'm going to make sure no one is able to deny it.
So before I ask this question, I will preface it with a note that many of the testimonies are quite graphic and quite disturbing. Are there any stories, accounts, testimonies that stood out to you as being particularly noteworthy for whatever reason, any that really stick with you to this day?
So I will mention that the book is, those of you who've purchased it and those of you who've perhaps read it already or will read it, will know that testimonies are completely uncensored. I tried not to soften the atrocities, I tried to present them as they were on the field. Basically felt I didn't have the privilege to try and soften what happened. This is what happened to those people, and I have to describe it as is on field. And the book actually covers, as you saw, more than 60 testimonies. And as I said, they cover all aspects of October 7th, if it's sexual assault and if it's children or elderly. And the warning was important because I will tell one of the most difficult for me testimonies to hear about. Actually, I'm starting with it in the book. I'll also tell you why it's very, very sensitive to me and very emotional, because I'm a cousin to two nieces and two nephews, and listening and hearing about children who got basically slaughtered is more than hard. And I sat with one of Zaka volunteers, who is also the spokesperson for the international media of Zaka. And he told me about one of the kibbutzim he entered several days after October 7th. And he is telling about a specific house of which he entered, and in the first room he found, it was hard to tell exactly what his age was, because at the moment those bodies were unidentified, but it was definitely a little child, a very young one, who was shot and burned. And then they moved to the next room, and they found another child in the next room, and that child had a knife in his skull, inside his skull. And next to his body, next to his dead body, his burned body, there was also a hammer, and on the hammer itself were still pieces of the toddler's skull. They didn't find any elderly in the house. They don't know why. They found only the two boys, which they estimate were approximately between 3 to 7, 8. Again, it was very hard to distinguish because of the condition of the bodies. But again, the first one was completely burned and shot, and the other one was both killed with a hammer and with a knife. And that's exactly this is exactly what October 7th is about. It wasn't about coming here and murdering and committing a terrorist attack. It was about destroying every piece of humanity, about destroying the possibility that the family of this boy would come to his grave and pray for him, because they made sure that there was nothing left of him. I can tell you that in the book I tell about, we've all heard about different kinds of sexual assault during the time since October 7th, and unfortunately, probably, it's hard to say, but the hostages are still experiencing it as we speak. And in the book I describe sexual assault not only on women, also on men, which is something that we did not hear about often. For instance, there was a Zaka volunteer who tells me about him coming to one of the houses again in the kibbutzim, finding, basically it was a four members family, and 3 of them were in one room, all of them tied up and shot, but the father wasn't there. The father was in another room, he was in the safe room, and he was found tied up, naked, and there were also metal objects inserted into his groin. So if we think sexual assault was only on women, no, it was definitely on women, unfortunately, but also on men, on the elderly, and many other testimonies that you will read in the book that basically describe what happened here on October 7th, with very specified, elaborated, specific, uncensored details, in order to provide the readers with very clear information of how ruthless the terrorists were. Even calling them terrorists is hard for me, and I definitely can't call them animals, because animals are way better and they're worse than monsters. And this is only 2 of dozens of testimonies which are not easier to listen or read. And I always say that this is probably one of the most difficult books in the history, but that also makes it one of the most important ones. That's the significance of the book, to share with the international community what happened, and apologizingly. We're not apologizing for what happened. We're not denying it. We're commemorating it. We will rave. We will win. We are strong, but we do have to remember what happened. And I am asking you deeply and sincerely, try and distribute and send the Amazon link to as many people as you know as possible, in Israel and abroad. It's super important.
Let's see if we can talk to Alon before we leave.
And I joined 100.
Thank you so much for the wonderful talk that you had. And we just want to say that we're totally behind what you do. But also, it's important to note here that we don't have to be Israelis to actually defend humanity. This can happen to anybody in any country, and no one on this planet Earth should condone any aspect of this. This is just a case study against one of the worst, horrendous crimes against humanity.
That's right. We don't have to be Israelis. We have to be human beings.
Yeah.
And that is historical documentation of what happened here on October 7th. And hopefully we'll be able to spread it out as much as possible to as many people as possible. And you can find it on Amazon, Testimonies Without Boundaries. It's super important that everybody knows what happened here on October 7th.
Yeah. We hope that this book will be in Chinese.
Hopefully as soon as possible. It's so important.